welcome back to One on One with Mr. U. Of course, I'm your host, Mr. U. In studio with us, author and life coach Jonathon Aslay in the house. Jonathon, how are you, sir? Good to have you in the box, man.
I'm excited to be here, Yusuf.
Same here, brother. Same here. So customarily, I always ask our guests to come in and kind of share briefly about their childhood and their upbringing. Sometimes it's multi-layered, sometimes it's pretty simple. Either way, we're ready to handle it, man. Go ahead and share how you got from there to here, man. Tell us about your life, man.
Yeah. So if I reflect on my childhood, I was born in the United States in Southern California. Both my parents were from Istanbul, Turkey.
Wow.
And why I'm emphasizing this, because back in the 60s, and I was born in the early 60s, it was the tail end of World War II. There was a shift in immigration here and a whole different variety of different things. And being first generation American, I always felt different than the kids I went to school with. I just felt different and sometimes weird, particularly because there were no other kids within 20 miles of me, that had Turkish parents. So in particular, I mean, there were other cultures and such like that, but Turkish was rather unique. In fact, I believe even still to this day, it's a small percentage of Americans are Turkish Americans. And I, like anyone else, I grew up with an average childhood. My parents, thankfully, were married for 66 plus years before my mother and my father passed away. And my dad was 99 when he passed away. So talk about, wow. Yeah. So, grew up middle class, very fortunate to live in Southern California. I live by I literally haven't moved a mile from the home I grew up in. I mean, I love it here. I have an ocean view. Yeah. So I'm a little bit spoiled. I went to college in Southern California, started a business career, met a woman. I met, it's interesting because the programming for us baby boomers, Gen Xers was the blueprint, was to go to college, get a job, meet someone, get married, buy a house, and start a family. And I followed that blueprint to a T, except for one thing. I was still clueless as to who I was as a person. I had a lot of childhood wounds and traumas, and I didn't show up very conscious in my marriage. And because of that, my marriage collapsed. And, there's no handbook that tells you how to be, an emotional grown-up. And I was very ego driven. I was very materialistic. The movie Wall Street, which greed was good, was like my Bible in a way,
Oh, goodness.
Okay. Yeah. And because of that, I was a very unconscious human being. And because of that, that led to some catastrophes I can talk about in a moment. But does that give you a flavor of how I got to where at least I was to my 40s?
I love the topic of self-awareness, because something that I deal with a lot on one of our shows. As a matter of fact, every teaching seems to have an element of self-awareness to it, because people forget they can't say please, they can't say thank you, they don't know how to show appreciation. It's a pretty scary world when people are acting like that. So I totally get that, man. I love that you were transparent about sharing that. I love for you to get into, because I want to get into your coaching, but I believe there's a life situation you had that I think kind of lends itself to how you got to the place where you're doing what you're doing right now. And that's in regards to losing your son, Connor. I think he was 19. 7 years ago. And I know it's a rough story, but I really feel like your story of grief and resilience, I think it's going to mean something to those that are watching and listening, not only on our platform, but also on your platform as well. So I'd love for you to share the story, wherever you want to start from. The floor is yours with that, man. And just love to go ahead and hear from you on that. Please share. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, taking me right up to the time I'd got married and I said I was unconscious. And, we did what everybody did. We made babies together. And but at that time, I wasn't in a solid marriage. I was very unconscious, very myopic, very selfish, and my marriage ended. At the same time, I lost my high-end corporate job where I was making over $250,000 a year 20 years ago, which would be the equivalent of like 400,000 today. And the market crash of 2008. And literally, Yusuf, my identity was pummeled, absolutely pummeled. And for the next 5 years, I was kind of dancing in the dark, so to speak. And I did drugs, I did alcohol to self-medicate. And another drug of choice was online dating. Now, the reason why I call it a drug of choice is what's interesting is when you're communicating online and you're talking to other people that have gone through divorce and the emotional effects, it was kind of therapeutic for me, but it was a substitute for real therapy. And during that 5-year period that I was immersed in this, I mean, there were times I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up. I was very depressed. And it took me some years to recognize I'm still in this selfish, myopic, unconscious behavior. And I started to seek help. It started with podcasts. It started with YouTube videos. It started with Tony Robbins and listening to his CDs. And then Wayne Dyer and all the personal development and self-help and spiritual work, and then even lend itself to therapy. But at that same time, this addiction to online dating was cultivating and birthing a business that I was unaware of, which was to help women understand emotionally dysfunctional men. That's what I was helping women do through the friendships I was developing, is like, look at, this is how men who show up dysfunctional show up, and you got to be careful dating those guys versus the emotionally grown-up guys. And so a combination, and then I began a practice of helping women improve their online dating profiles, understanding men, and immersing myself in personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy. And so you mentioned my son. By the time another 7 years, was it 7 years? 8 years had passed from that point, I had already amassed 10,000 hours of coaching, helping women. I had already done 3,000 hours of personal development workshops, trainings, all kinds of stuff. So by the time my son passed away, I had built emotional scaffolding to navigate this traumatic experience, because I had so much pain and grief in losing my identity that as I was rebuilding my sovereignty at that point in my life, I was able to navigate his loss, not from a devastating suffering place, but I chose to grieve with love. And I remembered even at his funeral, giving his eulogy, I looked at everybody in the audience. I said, look, we have a choice. I go, Connor would not want us to suffer. So we have a choice. We can grieve with suffering, or we can grieve with love. And to honor him, we need to celebrate our lives. And this is, I mean, I'm coming across a little bit, pontificating, but I don't mean this, but we need to celebrate our lives and celebrate it through love. And months after he passed, I began writing my second book, called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? A Journey of Personal Development, Self-Help, Spiritual Work, and Encouraging Therapy. And through that birthed a shift in my awareness around looking at life and asking, what would love do? How would love respond? And trying to live from that. Remember, I told you I was myopic, selfish, arrogant,
absolutely,
self-absorbed, and operating from a place of love.
Okay. If you don't mind, I mean, that's a poignant story, man. Who, in your assessment, who was Connor?
Oh, he was a multifaceted individual. But what I most admire about him, might be the way I'm going to answer that question, was there's a chapter in the book called Don't Let Anyone F with Your Chi. And he had this ability that he didn't let other people's opinions or projections affect who he was. He had a stoicism about him that that seemed to be innate. And he was one of those kids that beat to his own drum. So,
Okay.
I mean, he just did things different than everyone else. And
Where'd you see that most? Where'd you
pardon
see
me?
those? Where'd you see that marching to the beat of his own drum? Where'd you see that most play out? If you can give me some examples, where'd you see
You
that?
know, the memory that comes to mind, I wish I could pull it up right here, is that he started to like, we had all these ropes and he would tie it to places in the home and start like rappelling through the entire house. And like,
Okay.
I mean, that's completely as a parent irresponsible to allow this happening. But somehow that like was an example in my mind of how he just saw things differently.
Okay. No, I love that. Was he I'll change my question. In what scenarios do you begin to remember him the most? Is there certain thing that happened? Is it a sunset? Is it a TV show you guys watched together? Is it a place in the city where you live? Where do you seem to remember kind of the most, or what stirs the most memories of?
It's interesting. The first thing that came to mind was he had this sovereignty about him, but he also would call his grandmother and say, "Can we go have lunch?" Like, how
I love that.
many grandchildren call their grandparents and say, "Let's have lunch"? And there was this duality with him. There was this selfish duality, and as a child, we're in that myopic world of selfishness, and he was beaten to his own drum. But he had this capacity to be very loving to his cousins and to his family in a way that I just like he would call his grandma and say, "Can we go have lunch?" Like we have to force him, "Hey, go have lunch with grandma." It was like
That's
he
rare.
was initiating it. And I always, that's what's like, when you ask that, that's the first memory that popped up.
No, that's rare. No, that's totally rare. I love this. Uh, so many places I want to go and so little time.
Yeah.
uh, Tell me, because even though you shared about how you kind of had some attitudes you had to work through in yourself, what would you say, if you can locate it, is the biggest personal challenge you have with self-worth and self-esteem? Because you talk a lot about self-love now, and I'm just
Yeah.
imagining that's coming from a place where you had to deal with that face to face. What was the
Yeah.
biggest personal challenge you had with self-worth or self-esteem and such? Go ahead.
No, this is a great question, Yusuf. And the way I look at it is, when we think of the word self-love, I think of self-worth, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline, self-esteem, all these juicy self words wrapped up in love. And where I kind of have to go back to childhood for a moment, because
Mhm.
in third grade, my teacher said in front of the classroom, "You're stupid."
Wow.
And that defined me in some way, that I felt I was stupid. And in that created, I mean, in some ways that defined me on so many different levels, particularly in the area of lacking self-worth, particularly around my intelligence. And I still have this little third grader inside of me that still thinks he's stupid. And self-love is nurturing that little third grader inside. I can't remember what age I was, maybe 7, 8, 9, in that rough age, that little 6-year-old emotional inside of me that doesn't think he's smart, doesn't think he's worthy. Certainly getting my identity pummeled in my 40s completely wiped out my identity and my worth. And so when I think of self-love, it's because I think the number one emotional health wound most everybody is faced with, this is my perception, is I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, and I'm not likable. I think that's a core deep wound inside of us. And self-love is just nurturing that little emotional 6-year-old inside of us and just giving it a big hug and saying, "I've got your back. You're beautiful just the way you are." And so that's kind of how I view this concept of self-love. It's to nurture the emotional child inside of us all.
I love it. I love it. And you got a book out called "What the Heck Is Self-Love Anyway?" You referenced it earlier. I think
Yeah.
all I love the cover. It's pretty cool. I think one of the things that every author I've ever met and talked to, they all have a certain mountain that pops up somewhere in the writing of their book. Sometimes it's in the beginning, sometimes all the way at the end before they can finish it, or somewhere stuck in the middle. What was the big mountain, the big challenge you had in writing this book?
You know, I'm laughing because actually what was something fascinating happened when I publicly announced the idea of writing the book before I ever began writing it. And I got an email from a woman saying, Jonathon, I see you want to write a book. Do you need help, in writing it? I said, yeah. And I said, well, how much would you charge? And she says, I'm gifting it to you as a gift to Connor. Her name is Jennifer Matthews. And so what I did was, and at first we weren't sure how to do it. And I said, how about I record every single chapter? I'm just going to record 15 minutes of consciousness, and then you put music to it. In other words, put it to words. And she did that. And it actually felt very seamless. The real challenge was all the little mechanics within the book, like the book cover and the layout. And I hired somebody to do that. And it was such a pain in the butt to reread it and to do the grammar checks. And I mean, I still find mistakes today. And now I'd like to go back and change a few things, but I'm like, you know what? It was good enough at that time. But to have somebody to go, I'd like to help you write it.
That's awesome.
Was like a beautiful gesture. And she's prominently mentioned in the book.
No, I love that. I think it's incredible. This is my last question in regards to Connor, and really beautiful story that you shared, man. I love that. I know there's people who are listening, who are people who I know who have gone through grief like this. Tell me, I'm not trying to elicit the emotions by asking this question. This is something I just think is valuable, because I don't want to gloss over something that I think might have value. But losing a child, there's no way to describe the feeling that the parents have when that happens. These people in the family, the siblings, there's a feeling that you can't really explain to people. It's almost unexplainable. But what is losing a child for you? Kind of how does that affect your approach to community, your approach to building a family, your approach to kind of even if you see that happen in other people's lives? Tell me what kind of feelings come about? How do you approach it? How do you deal with it? How do you push through it? Does that make sense, Jonathan?
Yeah. No,
yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
And I'm going to answer it a little bit unconventionally, because I've certainly, there's 7 years have passed since that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
First off, I got a flood of love from people. I mean, thousands of comments on YouTube and messages for years, constantly. There's a ton of people that have a genuine sense of empathy, of sympathy, and they deliver love. Like it strikes a chord, particularly for those that have children. It strikes a deep chord of pain for most everybody. In fact, it was funny. My best friend came over the day after, and he was bawling his eyes off, and I was the stoic one in the moment. Wow. It was like he was in so much pain and suffering. So
you did the eulogy, man. I mean, you did the eulogy. I'm shocked.
But you know what?
That was something that you would be able to do. I thought somebody else would be that's detached.
I was very much, to me, that was a way of honoring him, to step into. It was really about stepping into love, doing that. And yes, it can be a very hard. By the way, I'm a little bit used to public speaking. I mean, I do podcasts, I do speeches, and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's a little bit more second nature. But here's the thing about, some people go, losing a child would be the worst. That would be the worst. Of course, a person who's never had a child, that might not be the worst thing for them. Might be losing a parent, might be losing a spouse, might be a breakup that can be devastating. I think to grade loss is a, I think we have to be careful, or not we. I encourage not to compare loss, because somebody could have been deeply in love with a partner that was together for 5 years, they weren't married, and the ending of the relationship is a devastation. It's a loss. It's a disconnect. And I think the reason why I'm not here comparing loss of a child I'm not comparing it to any other loss other than loss can deeply affect us no matter how that loss is. And so here's the thing, and there's graphs of what you go through. There's denial and depression and bargaining and anger and, acceptance. And you go through all these variety of different emotions. What I found helped me to get through this. For one, I'm going to be candid, in the sense that I was divorced at the time. So my ex-wife and I, we actually leaned on each other and became closer through this experience because we were distant after the divorce, and she's in a relationship and lives with somebody, but it actually brought us closer together because we were the only two that can empathize with each other in this way. So it's a beautiful example of love through this experience. But I want to encourage everyone that in any form of loss, we need support. Doing this by ourselves, I mean, a lot of people go inward and stoic, and I'm encouraging you to vent and open your feelings and process every single feeling you have. And if you need to take a baseball bat to a pillow in the bedroom, do all that, because it is through the expression of our emotions that we can actually find out more about who we are as individuals. And so no matter what that loss is, experience all the emotions, process it, and use support, because it's the loving support that helped me get through it.
I love that, man, because that idea of comparing losses, that's a rough one. I mean, myself, I would be described as somebody who is a quote unquote animal lover. Okay. I'm not going to feed birds. I'm not going to do any. I'm not going to have a bird fly on my finger. None of that's going to happen for me. I try to get dogs licking me in the mouth. That's not going to happen for me. That's just not my thing. Yeah. But when somebody has a loss at a family pet, I don't think they should be compared to the loss of a child. But sometimes people in our world want to compare like they're the same, like they should feel the same, like they hold the same place in people's lives. Like it's not. You can't. It's different. It's a loss. It's still significant. It hits home. It affects the family as a whole, I'm sure, but we can't make it equal. So I love what you said about comparing losses. Talk to me about what you're doing, because you have the title as a midlife self-love life coach.
Yeah.
As brief as you can, what is that?
So, before I want to be, just to give some context, I just changed that on my profile because I've been a dating and relationship coach for the last 15 years. And I'm morphing into more, what does it mean to love? What does it mean to love yourself? What does it mean to love others? And again, dating and relationships trigger our stuff like nobody's business, But ultimately, what I'm encouraging is individual sovereignty, individual empowerment. And yes, relationships can be a portal to growth, but it's also the encouragement to do your own work so you can be best prepared to be in relationship. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Just a few more questions. I think we'd be good to go before we end the show today. There's so many people, and I'm not on the dating apps. As a matter of fact, I don't even know how to even navigate that. I've never had to do that. My wife and I just celebrated 29 years. We're good to go. I never had the experience of dating in the app space. It was always in person, in clubs and in rooms and in parties. That's how dating was for me growing up in the 80s. But this dating app thing has a life of its own. You and I had a discussion about that in our offline conversation. What do you say to those emotionally wounded men that are on dating apps, that are on social media? I'm sure you can identify them right away. What do you say to them to kind of encourage them to either stay in the fight but just approach it differently, or maybe you should get out of this? What do you say to them? I'm just curious.
Well, here's the and by the way, I love the opportunity to talk to men, because I think men operate very myopically, selfishly, driven by their private parts more than they are their heart or their awareness of how they're can affect another human being. So if I was talking to men, but you see, you added the caveat, those broken, emotionally wounded men. Most humans aren't aware that they're broken and emotionally wounded. Like I wasn't aware for the first 5 years after my divorce. I was unconscious to my behavior. So to those men, I'd like to say, go effing work on yourself. That's what I'd like to say, but they're unaware of it. They're like, there's nothing wrong with me. And what I want to say to everybody is to do some therapy. I don't care if you think you need it or not. Do personal development work, do self-help work, because here's the barometer that makes all the difference. Are you living with joy in your life? Or are you in pain? Go seek help if you're in pain. But if you're operating from a place of selfishness, are you still really happy? Living a performative, egoic, chasing, life. Are you really happy? And if you're not happy, then do some work on yourself, and don't think a relationship is going to save you. Let me tell you something. A relationship isn't going to save you, emotionally speaking. You have to do that for yourself. And using women as, suppositories for your physical desires ain't cool, guys. It ain't cool. And you think you might be doing it in a genuine way, but many of you are not. So that's what I would say to guys. It's time for a wake-up call for a lot of men. And by the way, let me just say something to the women who are watching this as well. You got to work on your stuff too. You girls are no picnic out there. Believe me, you're no picnic out there.
Oh my goodness.
And so I'm a big proponent of both men and women equally working on themselves.
No, I love that. I was prepared to ask you about online dating do's and don'ts, but I'm going to pivot a little bit. This will be our penultimate question before we close the show out today. I can clearly tell that you have found success through online dating. Your story exemplifies that, which is awesome. You may not be in the majority, but you have found success. So all those that are watching and listening that are considering this, or maybe they're in it and maybe they're not utilizing it correctly, do you recommend online dating? And if you don't, what's the circumstance where you do recommend it? If that makes sense. Hopefully that question makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And to the extent that I recommend it, well, first off, it's here. 65% of all new relationships happen online. And I think that number is going to grow whether we like it or not. We can fantasize about meeting people organically, but the way most people's lives are cultivated, we're just not put in environments, and even forcing yourself into environments to be around potential singles is still challenging, especially for those of us in midlife, which I say is after baby making years and before retirement. So I think what we have to recognize is that we're meeting strangers, and to meet, and it requires entering with absolute intentionality and not the fantasy that many people are operating from. So, and that's the thing. I want to smack people, men and women alike. I want to smack them upside the head and saying, you're treating this very naively, very ambivalently, unintentionally. And that's my wake-up call, because it's a great tool. I've met my life partner through online dating. I've gone to weddings, dozens of weddings, from not just clients, from dear friends who met through an online dating app. So I'm a big proponent of it. It's just, we can do it a lot smarter. And most people do it so haphazardly, so arrogantly naive. I mean, they're arrogantly naive. They're like, I don't want to do this, so I'm just going to put up crap. And I'm like, that's the worst way of approaching it. And I just see a lot of people doing that.
No question about it. I want to, hopefully before the end, well, when the show's over, in the aftermath, I'm hoping that people can be directed to you to come ask you some questions about that. Maybe perhaps get some insights from you because you have plenty in regards to this. I hope they come to you because that many folks are doing it that wrong. Perhaps they can use some an outside voice to help out. So this is our final question for today's episode. It's called the CMV question. Everybody that comes through, they know what it means: career, mission, and vocation. I'm taking everything temporarily off of the board that you've done. I don't want to erase your life. Your life is significant. I'm going to temporarily erase all the work you've done from a career, mission, or vocation standpoint. What do you think Jonathon is most likely doing right now? This means something that this equates to something that he has never done. You might have thought about it, dreamed about it, but you've never done it before. What are you most likely doing?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because if I kind of subtract everything I've done to this point, I'm actually experiencing that emotion right now. I've actually looked back and said, I feel like I'm in the space of change in my life.
Okay.
And it's interesting because my relationship is really catapulting this experience for me. Is that I'm kind of in limbo right now. I want to be candid with you. I'm in limbo because I think I literally just 2 days ago, Yusuf, I was asking myself, what's next? Wow. And I'm like really sitting with that question. I don't have the answer yet, but I'm really sitting with what is next, because I really want to put a lot of effort and desire and passion into what's next. So you happen to be catching me literally in the moment where I'm sitting in that space and I haven't thought of the answer yet. So I can make up some answer right now, but I'm like, you're catching me in a moment where I'm actually subtracting everything I did and going, what does Jonathon want to do next? And beside love on my relationship and my friends and my family and just be a beacon, or at least a shining light for encouraging self-love and love. So I don't know if I answered your question, but does that kind of give you
the first time it's in over 50 episodes? This has never happened, but it's okay. Yeah. I mean, you're thinking about it and you're pondering it. And I think at the end of the day, the question is designed to do just that. Like I said, I probably have 2 or 3 answers to the question. Someone was to ask me the same question because it's things that I never got a chance to do. Either my mom discouraged it because it wasn't a viable career, or maybe the world says all you can't do from where you come from because you don't have, all the resources needed, those kind of things. So mine is easy. So I met somebody who didn't find it so easy. It's okay. This is a good thing. It's not a problem at all, man. But thanks for jumping in here, Jonathon. It's been a fantastic episode. I'm really excited about people coming to you. I hope I can hear some testimonies from you that people heard this show and they were able to get some help and some answers regarding online dating, grief, relationships, and even how to employ self-love in a non-hokey way.
Amen to that.
I'm pretty excited about this, man. But let everybody know where they can find your work, where they can find you to ask you these questions, to share stories with you, to get insights from your experience. How can they find you?
My name is listed right here. They can cut and paste that, put it in Google. The first thing that come up will be my YouTube channel. Certainly check out if anything resonates with you. Watch a couple of my videos, also my website, and then my social media, and my book on Amazon called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway?
Congratulations, sir. Great work by you, man. And thanks again for everybody who's watching and listening to this episode. And Jonathon and myself, any questions for us, please lob them our way. You can find this episode on the YouTube channel. It's up right now. And on listening platforms, it'll be up within 60 minutes from now. You can find it on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from. Thanks again for watching and listening to the show. We appreciate you being an audience for us today. Have a great day. Thanks.